pickup trucks. Depending on your viewpoint, you probably think they're either symbols for the hard-working American middle class, or compensation packages for very egotistical, awful people with, small displacement. But nobody thinks of them as performance or fast. And yet there's a whole market for sports pickup trucks that's been going on for the last 30 years. And the most successful of all of those financially has been the Ford F-150 Lightning. The 1990s saw the introduction of the sports pickup truck, with the likes of a Dodge Dakota tuned by Carroll Shelby, a GMC Cyclone that could outdrag a Ferrari, and a Chevy CK454SS with a monstrous 7.4-liter naturally aspirated V8. These things were very fast for the era, and if those guys did something, well, Ford had to match it. So SVT was tasked with turning the two-door short-wheelbase version of the F-150 into a corner-carving weapon. Kind of. It is a pickup truck from the 90s. Now, the first thing was make it faster with the installation of a 5.8-liter Windsor V8 making 240 horsepower and 340 torque. Then, in order to control that ferocious power delivery, they added a limited slip differential, reinforced the chassis rails to reduce flexing, and they made the drive shaft out of aluminum and then rebuilt the suspension from the ground up, even getting triple Formula One world champion Sir Jackie Stewart to fine-tune the handling. I don't know if that is high praise or an insult that they got Sir Jackie Stewart to tune the suspension on a pickup truck, but it's cool of him that he did it. And his guidance led to the suspension being dropped by 2 inches and adding rubber-tipped leaf springs on the back to eliminate wheel hop. So this 90s pickup could pull 0.88 Gs in the corners and reach 0 to 60 in just 7.2 seconds. Yeah, those stats aren't stellar today, but back then it was nicknamed the Cobra with a cargo bed. I mean, it even retained the towing and payload ratings of the original short-wheelbase F-150, despite being drastically faster. No, it did not have the same performance as the Cyclone, but it was easily the best of the rest, and it was definitely the best-selling. Almost 12,000 were sold in 3 years, and with the 10th generation F-150 debuting in 1997, SVT went back to the drawing board. This second-generation Lightning, if you will, was simply more. It used a stock F-150 frame with new lower trailing arm suspension and custom-developed 18-inch tires by Goodyear. Now, they needed 18-inch tires because they needed to fit the bigger disc brakes that were mounted on all 4 corners. And the brakes and the suspension and the chassis were not the only things different compared to the old Lightning. This new Lightning replaced the old Windsor V8 with a brand spanking new 5.4-liter Triton V8 with a 2.4-liter capacity supercharger added on to make 380 horsepower and 450 torque. This meant this pickup truck with rear-wheel drive in the early 2000s could do 0 to 60 in 5.2 seconds in the quarter mile in 13.7. And it was praised in not just being incredibly fast for what it was, but very good handling, and, quote, surprisingly stable at 146 miles an hour. 146 miles an hour in a boxy pickup truck. It's a very impressive vehicle, and Brian O'Connor certified. Now, the success of the first 2 Lightnings would make you think, hey, the 11th gen is coming out. Let's make an 11th gen Lightning. And they did. The Lightning concept was ready for the 11th gen F-150 with a proper 6-speed manual gearbox for the first time, massive Brembo disc brakes underneath 22-inch aluminum rims. They were ahead of the curve when it comes to overtly large rim sizes. They also added for the first time on a Lightning independent rear suspension, and this little thing called the supercooler. This was essentially air conditioning for the air intake. And colder air makes the air denser. Denser air means more air can get packed into the cylinders, and therefore it can generate more horsepower. 500 of it, to be exact. However, lightning did not strike 3 times, and the new Lightning concept was simply never built. It was deemed too complicated and too expensive for mass production, and when Ram launched the SRT-10 1500, well, they weren't going to compete with a Viper engine, so Ford shifted focus to the F-150 Raptor off-road. Although I should note that the supercooler concept was proven to be effective when its patent expired, and Dodge used it on their 840 horsepower Demon in 2018, making it the most powerful production V8 ever built. After the Raptor took over F-150 performance duties, the Lightning sort of fell off a cliff. Nobody had a reason for a road-based F-150 performance vehicle. And in a completely unrelated note, then CEO Mark Field said that electric cars weren't the future, which he was then promptly slapped in the face, and magic occurred. He started investing $4.5 billion into EV projects in 2016 to play catch-up. One of these projects was the Mustang Mach-E, and the other was an electrified F-150. And unlike the Mach-E, the new EV pickup wasn't a complete disgrace to the original namesake, because it was very appropriately called the Lightning. Unveiled in 2021, the Lightning EV is simply an electric F-150. Apart from the grille and the tires, it looks exactly how an F-150 should look. Nothing too fancy. Tesla Rivian. Sorry. So it had a 10,000-pound towing capacity and a combined payload of 2,200 pounds in the bed and the frunk. Now it has 2 battery options, one with a range of 230 miles and 450 horsepower, or an extended range model for 320 miles with 580 horsepower and 775 foot-pounds of torque going to all 4 wheels. That's ridiculous number. Gives this 3-ton truck a 0 to 60 of 4.5 seconds. That is dangerously fast. Pickup truck drivers are awful drivers. I don't have the confidence that they won't bend this into a crowd. It's a dangerous world we live in with these electric vehicles and accelerate so quickly with so much weight, but whatever. On the plus side, it does have a 120 volt and 240 volt outlet to power appliances or your entire house should you lose power, so it is a very fancy, expensive generator. And then there's the real performance version, because 4.5 seconds wasn't enough for Ford. Only recently teased in a Twitter post, it joins Ford's EV Performance Demonstration Group. And that's a pretty important list, including a 480 horsepower F100 EV Retro Mod, a 1400 horsepower Mustang Cobra Jet Dragster, a 1400 horsepower Mach-E drift car from Volgren Jr., and a 2000 horsepower Transit Supervan 4. So if it's in that crazy group, expect some pretty crazy 4-figure horsepower type stuff. Pretty big deal. But the F-150 Lightning is not all sunshines and rainbows. It has some downsides. One, like most F-150s or most pickup trucks in general, it starts at $40,000 without markups. 2, the range drops to just 90 miles towing a 7,000-pound trailer, which means you can barely make it out of town before having to charge the entire battery up for a few hours. And 3, they had a problem where it wasn't produced for a while on the assembly line because of everything from Chinese industrial espionage to literally catching on fire in the parking lot outside the Rouge factory. Yeah, it just spontaneously combusted because of a manufacturing problem that shut down the entire assembly line for a while. And having spontaneous fires is sadly not new for Ford, but something that should be avoided. Needless to say, it has a long way to go, but if Ford can sort their issues out, it'll be a real hit.